to you today. So I would ask our panels, starting with Nadia, what are the kinds of new economic pathways that would be feasible, that can help countries like Indonesia to do the transition to a low carbon economy without jeopardizing the forest?
Hi, thank you, Carolina. I was hoping that I will speak after the other speakers, but okay. And yeah, because I'm speaking from the perspective of the civil society here, and the civil society are what we call the owner or the rights holder if we're talking about the three basins and the forest, and how it will impact the livelihood of the people, how we can create solutions for new economic pathways without destroying the forest. And well, we, the three basins, also have, there's this paradigm or belief that we still have a right also for development if we are speaking about climate justice. So having said that, you mentioned about how the forest has been threatened right now in Indonesia. I'm reading this report, okay. I'm reading this report just now. One of the organization that made it is Auriga. It's a very close network of Madani, my organization in Indonesia. And we have been doing this mapping. And in Indonesia, nearly half of all nickel concessions are inside the intact forest. That is huge. And also that in Asia itself, in the Mekong Basin, is like 88 million people live in oil and gas blocks. And 3 million hectares are overlapping with the mining concessions. That's the size of Belgium or Taiwan, 3 million hectares. That's so huge. So yeah, the usual practice or the belief that economic growth is essential, but it can also harm the environment. We need to be more creative in thinking about that, because it needs to create the new economic pathways that align the environment and the economic and the social interests. In other words, it needs to center the rights or the needs of the impacted people, of the indigenous peoples and the local communities as the center of the development, because they are the ones who has been protecting the forest for years now, ever since this world is created, I think. So this is very important. It needs to focus on local needs. It needs to pay attention to the local natural resources. The carrying capacity is also important, because if you know about the 9 planetary boundaries, we are 6 of the planetary boundaries is being overshoot. So we really need to pay attention to the carrying capacity, because if not, then this climate solutions that we have been thinking about, we're talking about, all these mitigation efforts will not be create a successful achievement like we wanted to. We have been talking about adaptation in the morning session. It's very interesting, where we don't pay much about adaptation measures, and we should, because that is the central. And right now, what I see is that we have been talking, if we see forests, we're talking about carbon, we're talking about mitigation efforts and everything, but we don't see it also the function of adaptation of the forest itself. And that is very important. So it's not just for mitigation, it's not just to sell carbon, to protect the forest, of course, and then we have to also make use of the carbon, yes, but then the adaptation function itself of the forest, which is in the three basins, that is very important as well. And we have to recognize that and hopefully put more money in that, because the money is still very, very lacking in that area. So yeah, in Indonesia itself, right now we have we are shifting towards a sustainable development by, we have a low carbon development and climate resilience policy in place, which is now incorporated in the planning program. But yes, we have a new president just being elected, and to tell you the truth, I'm very worried with the new president, more like maybe Bolsonaro. I was like, yeah, so yeah, we are worried. So all this planning, all these efforts that we have been doing, we are very worried that it will, it will be threatened or by the interest of this. So, but yeah, I think with the international corporation, us being the three basins, Indonesia and Brazil and the Congo basins, if we together can speak up, can move forward, come with the right solutions that can be accepted by everybody, because it is for the sake of the world. It's not just for us, right? It's the sake of the whole world. So it can be powerful, if we can use this as leverage to say that, hey, we have this forest and it's very essential for the livelihood of the world. It's not just for us, but for everybody, and we need to protect this, and we need to put more effort in adaptation measures as well in the three basins. I think I'll start from there.
Thank you very much, Nadia. Indeed, the value of forests related to adaptation, it's still not tapped enough, so we should certainly go for that. I will now pass to Rodrigo, leave the financing, and who traveled 2 blocks only to be here with us. But Rodrigo, we would be very interested to hear from the point of view of Colombia, and someone who has been seeing a lot happening in the forests of Colombia in the past 30 years, lots of different development models. Which model you believe is the one we should choose, or what pathways you see as pathways that are more feasible for us to invest in the next 20 years? Please.
Gracias, Carolina. Para poder
Thank you, Carolina.
estos caminos de inversión, primero hay que saber en dónde estamos parados. Yo voy a contarles
I will tell you very briefly, not only what's been happening in Colombia, but also what's happening in the largest area of the Pacific coast of the Amazon. And I include Venezuela, Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, and Bolivia, along the borders with Brazil, where probably one of the most important phenomena is happening, not only leading to environmental degradation, but also to a loss of governance and democracy in the world. It is difficult to find a place in the planet today that has a number of protected land areas, indigenous land, and parks, public parks, as we have along these borders I just mentioned. The second point, along with this, something that's clear is that this is an area where today different capitals want to invest in the rush for public land and protected lands that exist in this area. So we have a huge governance problem that does not belong to each country, but which is a regional problem of non-governability. And here we have the topic of the protection of land, the problems that exist today because of the illegal extraction of gold mainly, although we do have other minerals, as is the case of copper, and the extraction and production of illegal drugs as marijuana in the very same area, and the proposal of investments for highways in the same area where forests are destroyed, where today, in the recent 5 years, we have the entrance of new activities. It is an extremely complicated area where public investments and private investments are leading to the result of a change and a transborder transformation of one of the most sensitive areas in the world, considering climate change and biodiversity. Let us remember something. All our water in the Amazon basin flows from the Atlantic to the Andes because of phototranspiration of forests, as we heard this morning, and we're losing the last piece of forest along the Andes and the Amazon forest. If this happens, we will accelerate the collapse of the Amazon. Not only we're losing forests, we're truly reaching a point of inflection, and we are going to transform the climate of the entire continent. There's another problem that's new. We're no longer only talking about Colombian armed groups that are expanding in the location. They do not only control illegal economies, but probably legal economies, not only in the rural areas and in the mountains. We have the trafficking of people. And also, they are demanding regional political power in different countries. So we have the presence of armed groups from Venezuela, from Brazil, from Peru, and from Colombia, who have land power. And we need to invest more in this transnational crime, because sometimes they are working along with regional governments. This is in the legal language, a process of co-opting. And it is important to mention this because, after all, we are talking about how to invest for the future. How can we stop these processes regionally? How come they don't lose political power? And how do they cover legal economies under the umbrella of public investments? And here we also have private investments that are responsible for part of this operation. In the banking sector, as we work in Colombia and Peru, we find that there is no information in the banking sector about where are the funds being targeted. And this is a phenomenon that's happening in the most part of the locations along the Pacific Rim. There is a weakening of the environmental legislation. This has been noticed recently. It is not a new phenomenon, but it is happening. Something is happening, and the law is becoming weaker. Large territories are changing, and there is public and private investment there, and they do not have the necessary conditions to reach the international market. We had a comment about the regional context of the continent in the Western Amazon area. We do not have information about where the material is being taken to. We have regulations in Europe, we have initiatives in the United States, but there are also other countries that are acquiring position in the international market. The United Arab Emirates, for instance, they are beginning to purchase beef. What's happening with the free trade agreements that brings together several countries where there are no legal mechanisms to control this activity? And finally, I would like to mention three key points. Number one, the civil society has lost support. We're talking about local organizations and government national organizations and large international companies. But at the national level, we have clearly seen a level of erosion of credit, of depression in civil society organizations. And also, what's happening? We were talking here a while ago. What happens to fake news? There is another element besides the financial, besides the government, we have a mechanism of communication going on. We need to control information that goes public, not only nationally, but also internationally, about human rights, about trade, about the protection of the climate, about vulnerable lands. So the anonymity, the lack of a discussion about what is happening is also happening as part of the model that's happening out there. Obviously, just as today we have narratives, we also have narratives to hide this impact not only over the climate and over the land in such a huge area that congregates more than 6 countries. I would like to say this to explain the magnitude of what's happening. The impact not only for one country, but for a whole region, and also some of the ways out of this problem. This is something that we need to consider as an objective.
Thank you. Now, Marcus, you have a very different role from Rodrigo and Nadia. You sit in a development bank of a country like Brazil, and some of the issues that were brought here are the rights for development, which we all do have, but we need to do it with a certain creativity, which the National Bank has been trying. And as well, the side that Rodrigo brought about it's not easy to work in territories where the state is not consolidated. Its presence, there are some places where the state is, there are others it's not. Please share with us a bit the experience of the National Development Bank and opening frontiers in these development paths.
Thank you, Carol. Thank you all to be here. I think that I brought some examples here of pathways, new pathways that we are working. One of them is, it's not necessarily new, but it's at our disposal and we should use, all countries of the free basis, which is technology. I think one is BNDES has used MAP biomas, which is satellite technology to map and to join that with the finance. So today we can see that if some company is deforested, then we cannot provide the money. And today we can even see all the properties of that owner, and we can block all of them at the same time. And we do it not directly because BNDES works mostly in Amazon indirectly from commercial or other development banks. So we can do it. And the result is somewhat interesting because the number is not big, which means that there is an illegal economy, very big working. And this is the problem. But we have to do our part on the legal ones for them not to become illegal. So this is one thing, use the technology. The second one is use an idea that is strong to join forces. And one of them we launched on COP 28, was the last one, is the idea that Carlos Nobre, a Brazilian scientist, has provided us with, which is the art of recovery. This idea of the art of recovery, in the Amazon we have the art of deforestation, which is a real art that involves 9 states in 7 states, I'm sorry, 7 states in the region. So it's a huge area, which means that this is the frontier. We have destroyed the forest, and the idea is to recover the forest, to create a block again to protect the forest. So this strong idea, I think it helps. It can be used together with the other Amazonian countries to rebuild this. And for us to do that, we have to use all the tools that we have. The grants and the credit. We are doing the same. So this idea is a very ambitious one, which is to reconstruct 6 million hectares by 2030. It's a huge in all kinds of numbers that you can imagine. In terms of money, it's $10 billion. In terms of size, in terms of the Brazilian goal, which is 12 million, the Planaveg, the national. So it's, I think, so this gives the momentum. This creates the momentum. This idea of the strong idea, I think it's important. I think Congo has launched the green wall also. So this idea, I think it's important, and to mobilize all tools that you have inside that umbrella. So for instance, we are using the Amazon Fund to recover 450 million reais to recover, to use that as a grant, as a mechanism for other companies and governments to use. Because in Brazil, I don't know if it's different in our countries, some subnational governments, they have difficulties to apply, to use the money from fines. So we create a vehicle, we create a mechanism for them to use, and I can talk later how we do it in a faster way. And we are providing the climate fund. The climate fund is comes from the oil. It's a part of the oil royalty that we use for forests. It's very cheap. It's the highest rate is 3.75%. So it's very cheap if you consider that the Brazilian inflation rate is around 4.5 or a little higher than that. So it's very interesting. And you combine that with other sources, market sources of funding. In the end, we have something very interesting for the private capital to invest. And so this idea of, we have the mechanism, which is the Amazon Fund, is the climate fund. So we have the two vehicles. One is grant, the other one is business. So we create that under the umbrella of the art of recovery. So this 450 million reais are already in place, already working. And we are providing money for companies such as Regreen, that we have approved a loan by the end of the year, for them to invest in large scale, because I think the goal here, the trigger here is to do it in scale. Because if we do it small, it's going to be difficult. We are going to have another bad moment, as you said, you are now facing Indonesia. And then it's very hard to keep what we have put in place if we have islands, good examples, but islands that will be destroyed by the criminal and by the legal capital. So we need to do, for instance, agriforest. There is a company in Brazil called Belterra. They are doing it in large scale. Agriforest. We can do it. We can create thousands of jobs, income to the region, and then when you have a bad moment again, they will be there. Nobody will touch, because it's generating income. As we said, the forest has to be, you have to protect the local people are saying, don't touch the forest, because I'm getting money from there. And the other one is the carbon again. I think the carbon, to use it with concessions of public land. This is something that some governments are already doing. The federal government, the Serviço Florestal Brasileiro is doing. The governor of Pará is doing. I don't know if you have seen. It's 10,000 acres, but they said that they want to put in concessions 5.6 million hectares. It's a huge space. And from there you can put agri-forest, carbon, and after that is in place, it's more difficult. Of course, you have always criminal fires and all kinds of things. But after you're there, it's difficult to put cattle when nobody will see. Unfortunately, we see that. So I believe that this, in the last one to finish, I think I'm a little bit away from my 5 minutes, is the blended finance. That's something that we have been doing, which is a way that combines grants with credit, grants and business. This is something very strong because we put more power to the grant, and we make it together with a business, as a business. So this is something interesting news. I'm not talking that the grant in itself is bad. I'm not saying it has its place. We'll always have. But I'm talking about new pathways. The blended can be an interesting. So I think this is the art of recovery. This idea, just to finish, a strong idea. The carbon, not to use the carbon credits, I think it's strong. The other, not only the carbon, all the others, but the carbon is more advanced than the biodiversity, water, and other environmental services. And the use of blended in finance also as a third.
Obrigada, Marcos. So we had a first round of our panelists telling us from their perspective, from where they sit, what would be these pathways. I would like to ask you who are here with us, if anyone has any questions you would like to do directly to any of the panelists, or bring any specific comment on potential pathways for tropical forest countries. Yeah.
Pode ser em português? Primeiro, parabéns.
First of all, congratulations
pela coragem e inovação aí.
For your braveness and innovative approach adopted by the Brazilian National Development Bank, BNDES. Question to those of you who addressed the challenges in the Amazonian basin. The question is, and by the way, I thought the idea of a reforestation arch is really fantastic, beautiful idea. And I think there's a tremendous challenge of ensuring how these regions will remain reforested. I mean, it is much more difficult to keep a regenerating forest as opposed to a standing forest. So among these technology solutions, what is the social technology that will ensure that people will remain in these areas of regenerated, recovered areas, recovered forests, to ensure that the forest will not be cleared again? In addition, I have a second question. I thought the Rebrin and the Belterra vehicles are wonderful, but in our view, we have in our organization mapped out regeneration, forest recovery, nation-based solutions companies, and we can count within the fingers of just one hand the number of businesses that can be invested in and which provide some kind of solution at the required scale. So what can we do to ensure that 5 years from now we have 1,000 times more companies like Belterra and other companies with concrete solutions? It is a real challenge, and I have seen really quite clearly that there's a lack of solutions pipeline to address the challenge. So what would your take be? And considering the governance challenge, not only in the Amazonian region, but also cross-borderly. More recently, I reached out to a lonely leader in Venezuela, totally alone, trying to reach out to other leaders aimed or engaged in conservation of the Amazonian region. So in your experience, what would you say are the ideal, optimum models for a functional kind of governance, which will allow philanthropy to ideally work in an ideal world together with governments, especially at the subnational or even national levels, so as to ensure we make progress in protecting and in making investments in solutions that will actually help preserve, conserve the Amazonian region?
Bien. Lo primero es para hablar de un
Well,
mecanismo de
first off, to talk about a social governance mechanism, you have to bear two things in mind. And number one, I'm not sure how much emphasis you have placed on this point, but there must be territorial, fully recognized, established territorial rights in the region. If you take a look at the map, what goes on from Venezuela all the way down to Bolivia today, the most critical issue lies in the fact that there is no actual territorial acknowledgement. And when I say actual, what I'm saying is that in certain cases, you may have recognized indigenous lands, but not fully demarcated or officially demarcated. In certain areas, you will find non-indigenous groups, for example, peasant groups, which are not recognized, and when and if they are actually replaced by people who have shady interests. What I'm trying to highlight is that from an international crime perspective, the indigenous lands as well as the peasants' lands and protected areas are currently a strategic objective for them, because those who control these territories and these organizations will ultimately have control over the entire territory and therefore have governance over it. So the first point really is, how can we recognize those people who may truly be the subjects that will help us build and establish governance out on the ground at the territorial level. So that's point number one. Point number two, how do we go about strengthening these mechanisms and the legal or rather local or regional leaders? And point number three, you have to bear in mind that there has to be some kind of local government in place, depending on the legislation in effect. In different countries, there will be different models, of course. And of course, to do so, you have to implement your own budgets, as well as put in place your own development plans, plus recognition and protection to the social leaders. And when I say social leaders, let me add a footnote here. I'm not sure you know, but the fact is that at least between or among Colombia, Peru, and Brazil, we are among the 5 countries in the world where there has been a high murder rate involving social leaders. I mean, deforestation, of course, is solved not only by adding palm trees and bringing cattle, but also by stopping killing, murdering people or leaders. So to put it very bluntly, we want to be able to keep the populations in place, uphold the leaders, and of course uphold the different forms of government, plus financial relations, plus legal relations. And I would go further and say that currently we see forcible migration processes to displace populations, population shifts. It could be a peasant or extractivist reserve area, and when you change the population, you change the governance. And this has pretty much marked the kind of conflicts we have seen on the ground. So the matter involves not only social players, but also territorial players. And there's the third element I want to refer to. Never fail to realize that we have seen a setback in the legislation. I mean, all of us who are here today have a chance to work directly at the territorial level, but there's also a higher level, which is the political policy making, lawmaking level and dimension. Because if you don't address this third dimension, only with difficulty will you be able to make any progress, because politically and legally you will be weaker. And as I said before, this is not an isolated case in the Amazon region. Quite certainly in Indonesia and also in the Congo, we will probably find similar situations. I mean, there are political shifts and changes that are really leading us to lag behind in terms of the progress we had made for the protection of territorial and vulnerable populations. This is not by accident. So there has to be a correspondence of efforts among these different dimensions. Is this a short-term effort? No, it's not. And if I may, let me refer to one last element, because I see so many people from the non-government sectors and from government sectors as well. And that is the fact that we should also be able to rely on those who will be able to trigger a generational change at the population level. I mean, generational change because our countries unfortunately have for decades forgotten those populations which are currently, many of them, co-opted by or captured by illegal players or informal players. But the fact is that they do not really recognize a state apparatus because the state does not provide them legal businesses opportunities, nor does it provide them with security or minimum livelihood conditions. It therefore follows that you have the illegal economy and different ways of exercising the illegal economy, which become the best option for many of the local populace. And this is also an important element from the peace building perspective. What we have seen is that acceptance of a state takes place not from a de facto perspective, but rather by realizing the actual recognition of the state apparatus. So the state must be recognized in the eyes of the population, just as governments do mutually. I know it is a long effort. I know the effort is not easy at all, but it is what it is, and it is what we have before us.
Daniel, I think very good questions. I'm going to start from the last one, and then how can we have more Belterras and greens? And one of the issues, I think we have two issues to move on. One is guarantee, talking about the banks from bank side, and the other is land, legal land. Guarantee is something that we have been talking a lot with the commercial banks because we provide the money that is cheap, which is climate fund, etc. But we need them to be together. And all the banks are saying that they want to be together on the green economy, etc. So we are pushing, and I think we are advancing with them for them to participate, because BNDES alone will not be able to do all these big projects, as the climate fund has a limitation, around 3,000 million reais per year. So it's not going to change. It's good money, but it's not going to change everything as we want. The other one is something that in the Amazon we know that this problem of land regularization, I think it's in the whole region. We have to work on that. Why? Because all these restorations, and I'm talking here on the Art of Recovery, these 450 meters, we call Restore Amazon. We created this name. And there we are going to support around 150 projects of 5 million. So we are going to be on all 7 states. This is a good, and we have the chain of value that we will be local. We want it to be local. But how can we involve more, be beyond the grants? How can we go as business? Something that I believe is partnership. And not, I believe that the companies are saying that they can only grow doing partnerships. And partnerships not only with the big guy with the big land. Belterra, for example, I think they are, for me, a very good role model. They are doing with small. And how can we do it? To make a pattern in terms of contract, for you not to be discussing with everybody. So this is the pattern that we have as a contract. They have legal legitimacy, social legitimacy. So this is something that you have to trust. They are in the region, they have this. And the third one is technology. For instance, if you want to put, and I believe not only on ecological restoration, I believe on productive restoration. For instance, this Art of Recovery is doing on settlements. Will be partly doing on settlements. So agroforest is there. So I believe we can do this through partnerships involving even the small. And the carbon, for instance, you can do by satellite. You have technology today to do it with artificial intelligence. Because again, we have only two in the world doing certification, Verra and Gold Standard. I read the other day on the Brazil Journal that Verra has 2,275 projects being analyzed. So how can we change a region? They are good, but we cannot depend that Brazil has a great knowledge. We have great scientists. You know them, Bernardo, Brancaleon, Carlos Nobre. We have very good scientists, very good universities. We can do it here. So I think this thing is develop partner. And even when we are talking about concessions, we are also creating we want to create a fund for the community also, so that the carbon is distributed among the population also. Not only with the company, BNDES receives its payment, the company receives, the one that is offsetting is happy and the population is not happy. So we are drawing this to involve a fund to do agroforest, everything related in the state, not necessarily in the side of the concession. Okay, I don't know if I answered.
Obrigada, Marcos. So we are coming to a close.
Thank you, Marcos.
The first People and Climate Initiative that organized this event, our key goal is to channel the most efficient way possible and with the highest volume possible in investments in the 3 basins, and thinking of how we give voices to the Global South. So this is why we're very happy to be able to do a panel with voices of the Global South. We were invited to join this meeting because it's a meeting that can bring messages to the G20. So to close our panel today, I would like to invite each of our panelists to what would be the key pitch we can do to the G20, thinking about tropical forest countries and the development paths of these tropical forest countries. What should they be investing in the next 7 years, this decade? I'll start with you again, Nadia, if that's okay.
Okay. There's so many things that needs to be done, but I would say that the key is, again, to put the people, the IPLCs, as the center. So if we're talking about all this global policy, national policy, but at the end of the day, you were talking also about regional, the ones who live in the forest, you have states here in Indonesia, we have provinces, we have districts. So those are the ones who are going to implement all these policies. So it's very important as well to work with them. That's what we're doing, my organization. There are so many examples, and from our experience that by working with these local governments to ensure that they are implementing the right policies, they are also making the right planning, and also the right, helping them. They really, really need to be supported with capacity building and funding, yes. I hope that so many donors can also be can help in channeling that for Indonesia. We don't have the Amazon Fund, we have this environmental fund that has been formed like only 2 years ago, I think. I'm very much interested in also learning how you channel all this money on the programs and everything. Because it's very important for the local government itself to get the funding, which is, it's not easy for them to receive the money because they don't have the necessary, the necessary requirements in place that all donors are requiring, and they don't have also the mindset also that the way that they are doing things, this new economic pathway is actually can be very beneficial and actually can help to grow their areas. So there are some examples that we have been doing. There's this called the Green District Association. We're working with them. It's only like not so many, only 10 districts, but they are very committed in this green economic pathway. And there are others, also examples like this Nusantara economy from the Friends of the Earth Indonesia initiated. That is amazing because one of their pilot projects is like they want to create equal and profitable sales ecosystem for the community. One of the they tried with areca nut. I don't know what's that in Brazil, but yeah, that's what they're selling, and they managed to grow the asset from 25 million. This is rupiah. 25 million to 2.8 billion rupiah, so that's huge in less than 1 year. So yeah, those kind of things that there are examples that can be done if you do it correctly. And there are so many other examples. I don't think if I have so much time here, but the message for G20 again. So first, if you want to achieve results and do things correctly, first of all, stop the extractive industry. You really need to change the way you do things. So stop those economic activities and start thinking local. We are very diverse. Like Indonesia itself is very diverse, and you don't always have to think large scale, because you can do local in small scales, but a lot, like many small scales which work according to their carrying capacity in each places. So that's what important, and then you can create financial solutions. I agree that you have to do it at scale, but then how at that amount of scale can be distributed to so many parts, because that so many parts really need the financing. And again, put people at the center. So,
Thank you very much, Nadia. Please, Marcos. 2 minutes.
I think one message that we need to insist on the G20 is climate risk and cost, because this is the pocket is a very sensible part of the human being. So I think we need to, because what we are seeing in Rio Grande do Sul, in Brazil, is a demonstration, obvious demonstration that we have problems. This is not somebody that is in the academy thinking in a model that there is a potential problem. No, it's here, it's real, it has costs, billions of reais that we are going to need to reconstruct the state. So this is concrete. This is something that we have to push, because if in the 70s and 80s in the movement, the environmental movement was starting, this was some people saying, pay attention. People were saying that one day we'll have a catastrophe. No, here we have it. So I think this is concrete, this example. But this one example, obviously not. We had in Rio 2 years ago. We had in São Paulo 1 year ago. So it's abundant. It's always there. It's not in this in the Amazon a drought. So if it's there, it's just we have to do something because it's there. It has money involved, costs involved. So if we don't push to that, people, as I said, people are involved. People are in the center suffering. So these are, and biodiversity is something that a message that is important. I don't know why I'm still trying to understand why biodiversity is important is when we construct a forest, when you recover a forest, it's there, of course. It's a biodiversity. All the animals, the plants, and the bacteria, it's always there. But this is so important, it's so strong, this message of biodiversity, that I think we need to insist, because it's very concrete also. People, I'm thinking about joining support from young people, as we were saying. I think this idea of the biodiversity is has a strong, concrete, because you see the animal. You see when you have the onça, I forgot how to say that. Jaguar. The jaguar, then it's strong because you see them in the. It's huge. It's beautiful. It's there. So we should use it because it's from the nature. We should use it, I think. I think so. These are the topics: biodiversity, climate risk, and costs, and people. I think 3 points that I would insist.
Bueno, pensando en recomendaciones
Well,
a ese nivel,
considering recommendations at this level, at the G20 level,
tú acabas de señalar que yo creo que
there's one point you have just mentioned, which I think is critical,
hay un tema de costos.
the costs
Mientras los
factor.
costos de sostener el bosque sean
For as long as the costs of keeping the forests
menores,
standing
producir cualquier otro
remain
producto,
lower than
no
producing
vamos a
anything
tener.
else, I'm sorry, but we will
¿Quién
not have
está entrando en
forests
el bosque
in
y
place.
agarrando entonces
Now,
a
who is
capturar
going
la
into the
tierra,
forests? Well, we see the
comprar
land grabbers going
ración
in.
vía eso a
We
través de las
see
vacas,
those
de
who
las
consolidate
palmas,
this
la soya,
through cattle or
el
through
oro,
palm
la
trees
coca.
or gold or
Entonces,
coke.
uno, desde la economía legal,
So number
hay
one,
que
from
trabajar el tema de
a legal
impuestos
economy
sobre
perspective, we should think of or
aquellos
work on
sectores
the
productivos que
taxation
tienen un impacto de
over
presión
those production
ambiental,
sectors of
social
the
y
economy that
medioambiental
have a
positivos.
social and
O sea, no
environmental
puede ser que la
have social and
competitividad
environmental
de
liabilities
mercado
in these
y los
areas.
precios de
You can no
producción
longer
sean
say that market
los pasivos
competitiveness
ambientales y
or
sociales de todos. Yo
production
creo que
costs
y eso
should be
aplica,
borne
ojo, no
by
solamente a la
everyone or
producción
by all
in situ,
players.
sino también a la
And
comercialización.
that, of course, brings us to not
¿Qué
only
quiero decir
on-site
con esto?
production, but also on-site marketing or
Es
local
difícil entrar solo al
marketing or
tema de
trade.
impuestos
What
cuando
am I
hay
trying to
minería
say?
ilegal,
Well, it's very difficult to
pero
talk about
difícil con
taxation
la
when you
comercialización.
talk about illegal
¿Qué
mining.
pasa con
True,
quienes
but what about
efectivamente
the
exportan el
actual
oro? Que
selling,
muchas
the
veces
marketing, the
lavan el oro
importing
ilegal.
and exporting
¿Qué
of
pasa con los
gold?
países que lo importan y
Those
no
who
tienen ningún
oftentimes
tipo de control
launder
ambiental?
illegal gold. What about those
Entonces
countries
creo que
that
hay un tema de
oftentimes
trabajo de
import
recomendaciones. Uno,
illegal gold without the
trazabilidad,
relevant
dos,
documentation?
sistemas de
So there's
impuestos,
an important point here. Number
tres,
one,
sistemas
traceability, and
de
number two,
mitigación a
taxation
larga
systems,
escala que
a
permitan
tax
darle
system,
valor
and three,
al bosque.
investment
Y
at a
bosque no es
large scale
solamente
that will allow us
no es
to add
solamente
value to the
es
forests. And forests are
territorio,
not
es
only about
ambiente, es cultura, por lo tanto,
carbon
tiene que ir acompañado
or
claramente de
land. It is about
derechos.
people and culture,
Es
which of course has to be
imposible
followed
generar
by
una
rights.
condición
It is not
de
possible
economía legal
to
sin que haya
establish
una
a legal
restricción
economy
importante de
condition if you have a
reconocimiento
constraint
territorial
in the
y
form
de
of lack
normas
of
claras
territorial
en
recognition
donde
and
no
clear
haya
production
esa
rules,
diferencia
where that
tan
distinction
marcada
is
entre
not
destruir
so
el bosque por la vía
sharp
legal o ilegal, cualquier
between
tipo de mercado,
destroying the forests
respecto de
through
mantenerlo
legal or illegal
live
manners as
en
opposed to keeping the
políticas
forests as a
de
standing
impuestos y de
forest.
reconocimientos que
So there's a
tienen que
tax policy and the
promover el
recognition policy,
mantenimiento
which
justo
must,
del
of course,
bosque
promote
y
the standing forest and the
cobrar
use
el
of
impacto ambiental y
forests in a
social de
sustainable
todas las
manner.
formas de
And of course,
producción.
also
No puede ser que sigamos sosteniendo la demanda
hold
mundial de
accountable
agrocommodities
the
y
other forms of
minerales
production and
a
consumption.
costa de no
We
conservarlos.
can no longer, of course, keep on exploring the resources
Ya un
at no
segundo,
cost.
Carolina.
Just one more
Hay un
second,
asunto que me
Carolina.
parece que es
Now, there's
importante
one point which, in my view, is important
el
to
año pasado
mention.
hubo una declaración muy
Last
clara en la
year,
región de Belén, en
we
donde
had the
todos los
Belém
países, todos los
Declaration,
países miembros
where
del
for the
bloque
first time
señalaron que
all
estaban
OTCA or
reconocían, estaban
ACTO,
dispuestos
ACTO
y tenían la voluntad para
member
trabajar
countries recognized
de
and
manera en
indicated that they
común
were willing
el tema
to
de lo que
work
está sucediendo con la
jointly on
macrocriminalidad, pérdida de
matters
derechos
involving
e
macro
impacto
crime, loss
sobre
of governance, and the
territorios
impact
protegidos y
on
territorios
protected
vulnerables
territories
en
and
la zona de la
vulnerable
Amazonía.
peoples in the Amazon region.
Es
ACTO being
absolutamente
the
crítico poder
Amazonian
lograr
Cooperation
que
Treaty Organization,
ojalá un
ACTO.
impulso y una
So it is
alineación
absolutely
en ese sentido,
necessary to ensure
porque
G20
estamos
can
hablando
ensure we make progress at this level, because whatever goes on here at the Amazon region will have a global impact, and more specifically in the area we're talking about. I mean, you mentioned Rio Grande do Sul, and I think Rio Grande do Sul can be described as being the preamble of what has been going on or may go on in other countries. Climate impact will be increasingly stronger. Droughts and floods and hurricanes, which are already going on increasingly more frequently. And this has been fueled by a more rapid loss of these combined factor, macro crime, loss of governance, and therefore there is a regional need, not only at the country level, but also at the regional level. In conclusion, may I say that hopefully within G20, discussions can be held about the role of communications in strengthening regional democracy. Without communications, the illegal models will be recurrent. Bear in mind, we're talking about publicly owned or community-owned lands available at a large scale. Number two, certainty that there will be public investments, and also, of course, traceability is absolutely needed, and also certainty about impunity. The model works from those assumptions, and also we should be able to rely on transnational justice models, and that means we should really elevate the transnational justice mechanism in Latin America, which are remarkably low in Latin America.
Thank you very much for everyone.
Thank you, everyone, for your inputs.
The big plenary. Eu gostaria de agradecer muito a todos que aqui estão. Vocês fizeram dessa discussão uma discussão muito mais
I want to
interessante.
thank you all for attending this panel session, which has become so much more interesting because of your active involvement.
We will keep more information in the website of the Forest for People Climate Initiative. And we hope we'll be connected around this topic from here onwards. Thank you. Muito obrigada. Gracias.